She wasn't just denied. She was humiliated. What happens when the Duchess of Sussex, once the toast of royal tours and Netflix boardrooms, steps out of her blacked-out SUV, dressed to the nines, expecting applause, only to be stopped cold by a man with a clipboard? What happens when the woman who once stood beside Queen Elizabeth gets left outside in front of the paparazzi like an unwelcome extra? This isn't fiction. This isn't a scene from a revenge comedy or a satire about fallen fame. This happened to Meghan Markle, in front of hundreds of lenses, and not one of them turned away. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because when Meghan Markle tried to enter the Marty Supreme Premiere in Los Angeles, an event crawling with Hollywood's elite, political power brokers, and Netflix's rising stars, she was met not with red carpet reverence, but rejection. Flat, public, brutal. They say the higher you rise, the harder the fall. But no one said the fall would come with flashing bulbs, murmuring crowds, and a security guard who didn't blink as he told her, "Ma'am, you're not on the list." Let that sink in. Not on the list. For a woman whose entire rebrand post-royal exit has been about access to platforms, to influence, to global audiences, this was the equivalent of the red carpet being yanked from beneath her heels. But was it an honest mistake? Or a calculated message? You see, this wasn't just any premiere. Marty Supreme was the industry moment, a convergence of old Hollywood prestige and streaming-age ambition. Directors, agents, Oscar hopefuls, billionaires. The crowd wasn't just glamorous, it was powerful. And Meghan Markle didn't just want to be there. She needed to be. The timing? Strategic. The optics? Pre-planned. Sources close to her team say Meghan had been teasing a soft re-entry into the Hollywood scene, testing the waters, reactivating old contacts, and planting subtle press whispers about new projects, new partnerships, and a comeback in the works. But what she got was silence. Or worse, dismissal. Because here's the kicker. It wasn't just that she wasn't on the official guest list. It's that someone made sure she stayed off it. And that part? That's what's lighting up private texts, insider gossip, and furious PR damage control behind closed doors. Why would a major event, one backed by producers who had, in the past, courted Meghan and Harry for cameos, charity collabs, or backstage features, suddenly slam the metaphorical door in her face? Who made that call? And perhaps more importantly, why now? Well, what if I told you this was bigger than a botched invite? That what happened outside the premiere was just the surface? That underneath it all, this moment, caught on camera, whispered in VIP lounges, dissected in crisis meetings, reveals a seismic shift in how Meghan Markle is viewed by the very industry she once thought would crown her queen. Because Hollywood never says no to someone unless it's safer or smarter than saying yes. And when Meghan stood there, flanked by stunned staffers and frozen paparazzi, the message was clear. This wasn't a scheduling mix-up. This wasn't a late arrival. This wasn't, oops, you just missed your window. This was deliberate. And deliberate things always come with motives. Now, here's where it gets even messier. Because while Meghan's team scrambled to contain the visuals, shielding her from certain cameras, spinning the story to sympathetic outlets, the real damage wasn't the footage. It wasn't even the headline. It was the whispers. The whispers from inside the premiere, from studio assistants, from fashion stylists, from executives who leaned in just slightly closer to each other and asked, "Did you see what just happened to Meghan? Was that planned? Is she done?" Those whispers echoed louder than the press flash, louder than the headlines, louder than the carefully worded denial her team issued the next morning. Because in Hollywood, silence isn't ignorance. It's intention. And when an entire room of power brokers collectively chooses not to invite you back inside, that's not an accident. That's exile. So why was Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, co-creator of Archwell Productions, humanitarian advocate, and one-time royal firebrand, standing alone outside a building she thought she belonged in? We'll answer that. We'll take you behind the rope, into the meetings, the missed calls, the ignored messages that led to that fateful moment. We'll uncover how one miscalculated move from her camp just days before may have sealed her fate. And we'll expose the names, yes, actual names, of people who allegedly lobbied behind the scenes to keep Meghan out. People who were once seen in her circle. Allies turned liabilities. Collaborators turned competitors. But before we get to that, ask yourself, what if this wasn't the first time she'd been blocked? What if there's a pattern? What if this public embarrassment was simply the first one to be caught on camera? Think about it. Hasn't something been off lately? The missing invitations. The canceled panels. The sudden silence from Netflix, Spotify, even Vogue. We were told it was creative differences, scheduling issues, quiet realignments. But now it looks like a reckoning. And the Marty Supreme Premiere? That velvet rope moment? That wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the moment the end finally went public. And just as the flashbulbs started flickering and the security guard firmly repeated, "Please step aside, ma'am," Meghan turned. Slowly, her jaw tight. Her eyes scanning the line of cameras now watching her not as a guest, but as a spectacle. There was a pause. A long one. Her driver stepped forward. A panicked aide whispered something into a phone. But the damage was done. And across the city, inside a soundproof luxury lounge on Sunset Boulevard, a rival agent received a text that read, "She just got blocked. In full view. This is going to go viral." And it did. Oh, it did. But the most damning part? Wasn't what happened in front of the cameras. It was what happened after. The frantic calls, the shifting blame, the damning leak from someone on her own team, and the story that no outlet dared publish until now. Because what came next? What Meghan did next? That changed everything. And no one saw it coming. They say humiliation is loud when it happens in silence. And Meghan heard every second of it. Have you ever felt the world watching, and yet no one stepping in? That's what it looked like. It's 7:43 p.m. The Marty Supreme Premiere is at full capacity. Cameras lined like dominoes across the entrance, reporters shouting for comments, flashes popping like strobe lights. The SUV pulls up, sleek, black, deliberately late. It's Meghan Markle, dressed in deep emerald satin, sleek bun, Cartier bangles, and heels that click with purpose. For a moment, everything pauses. You can feel it, even through the videos now circulating online. There's a beat. A moment of anticipation, as if the crowd isn't sure if they're about to witness a power move or a disaster. And then she steps out, confident, poised, smiling. But that smile doesn't last long, because within seconds, she's met not with cheers or ushering arms, but confusion. A clipboard, a squint, a security guard whispering something into an earpiece, a woman in a headset checking a phone, shaking her head, avoiding eye contact. And then those words, "Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the list." She blinks. Her assistant steps forward. "There must be a mistake," she was told. "I understand, but she's not cleared for entry." Silence. Let's pause right there. Can you imagine that moment? The chill that creeps in? The knowledge that dozens of lenses are aimed at your face. Not because you're being celebrated, but because something's gone terribly wrong? This wasn't just rejection. It was public rejection. Tactical rejection. The kind that hurts because it says more than "you're not invited." It says, "We don't want you here." And that's a message Meghan hasn't heard in years. But this time, it was loud and clear. Now, let's be honest. Meghan Markle isn't unfamiliar with friction. She's been booed at royal events, dragged by tabloids, critiqued by palace staffers. But this was a different flavor of disgrace, because it wasn't from the institution she famously broke away from. It was from the world she thought she was escaping to. Hollywood, the very stage she assumed would welcome her back with open arms, rolling out red carpets, applauding her bravery, handing her platforms, scripts, and photo spreads. Instead, she stood outside a premiere she wasn't allowed into. And this wasn't just any premiere. Marty Supreme was the kind of event publicists beg to get their clients into. Netflix had poured tens of millions into the production. The director was a rising critical darling. The cast? A-list. The guest list? Impeccably curated. Meghan's team thought they had secured a slot, but someone made sure that slot didn't exist. And as the seconds ticked by, the cameras kept rolling. You can see it in the footage, Meghan's expression shifting, smile fading, chin stiffening, the kind of tight-lipped composure that says, "Hold it together. Don't let them see it." But they saw it. And one clip, now viral, captures the exact moment when a lower-tier influencer, escorted by a handler, is waved through security, while Meghan Markle stands still. You can't script that kind of irony. But here's the most damning part. As Meghan is quietly ushered back toward her SUV, you can hear the murmurs. Is that Meghan? Did she just get turned away? Did she not have an invite? Those whispers, tiny at first, ripple across the event, bouncing from red carpet hosts to live streams to digital gossip rooms in real time. And that ripple became a wave. Now let's zoom in, because it wasn't just security that blocked her path. It was a woman, early 40s, clipboard, headset, black jumpsuit, who calmly repeated the phrase, "Not on the list, sorry." Who was she? Sources later identified her as the head of talent coordination for the event. A respected gatekeeper who isn't easily swayed by celebrity panic or PR name drops. The kind of woman who knows when a name has been unofficially added but isn't authorized. And she didn't flinch. Not when Meghan's assistant whispered her name. Not when another aide offered to call someone from the inside. Not when the Duchess herself tried to make eye contact and smile her way past the blockade. The velvet rope didn't move. But something else did. Because while Meghan stood outside, inside the venue, someone noticed. An executive, a handler, a competitor, a friend turned stranger. And the texts started flying. She's outside. Was she even invited? Security just denied her. What happened? Within minutes, it wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was a narrative. A PR crisis unraveling in real time. Meghan's team didn't have hours to respond. They had seconds. But there was no clean spin. Because the video was already online. So the team pivoted. They issued a whisper campaign. There was a mix-up. She wasn't trying to attend. She was just nearby. Her attendance was never confirmed. It was exploratory. But no one believed that. Why? Because of what Meghan was wearing. That dress wasn't for passing by. It was for posing. The makeup? Red carpet ready. The assistant's bag? Contained press kits. This wasn't a drive-by sighting. This was a planned arrival. And it ended at the rope. You might ask, couldn't she have just called someone? Pulled strings? Gotten in somehow? Here's the thing, she tried. And the calls went unanswered. That's what stung the most. Because this wasn't just rejection from strangers. It was silence from supposed allies. The same producers, stylists, and execs who once gushed over her now ghosted her. Some say it was career caution. Others say it was strategic distancing. But one insider put it bluntly. Her stock's dropping. And no one wants to be the one holding the bag when it hits zero. Harsh. Maybe. But Hollywood has no patience for misalignment. And Meghan? She was misaligned. With the event. With the messaging. With the moment. Because while Marty Supreme was about new voices, creative reinvention, and the next generation of filmmakers, Meghan represented something else. A past brand. A political liability. A PR wildcard. And in that industry, wildcards don't get invites. They get shut out. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. As Meghan left, quietly, defeated, but not broken, she did something no one expected. She made a call. Not to Harry, not to her agent, but to someone else entirely. Someone her team had kept very quiet about. Someone linked to a rival studio. Someone whose name, when it leaks, will change the narrative entirely. Because what Meghan did next wasn't retreat. It was retaliation. And what she's planning now. Let's just say the velvet rope moment might have been a red light. But Meghan's about to slam the gas pedal. Hard. And if she gets her way, the people who blocked her might soon wish they hadn't. Being not on the list is one thing. Being removed from it is another. Let's ask the real question here. Was Meghan Markle ever actually supposed to be at that premiere? Or did someone go out of their way to make sure she wasn't? At first glance, it seemed like a simple mishap. A scheduling mix-up. A guest list oversight. But as the dust settled and insiders began whispering, one theme kept emerging. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. And it wasn't subtle. You see, in Hollywood, the list isn't just a name check at the door. It's a currency of power. A barometer of influence. A reflection of how wanted, needed, or strategically useful someone is at any given moment. And Meghan? Let's be real. There was a time she didn't even need to ask. Back in 2021, when the Oprah interview was still a cultural firebomb and Archwell had just inked its Netflix deal, Meghan's name could get her into almost any room in LA. Fashion houses fought to dress her. Directors flirted with Doka cameos. Charity galas bent over backward to make space for her. But fast forward to the Marty Supreme Premiere in late 2025, and not only was she absent from the A-list, She was actively excluded. So what happened? Who pulled her off the list? And why would they risk alienating someone who, at least publicly, still carried the Duchess glow? It starts with the structure of guest lists. And this part? It gets surprisingly political. Premieres of this magnitude, especially ones backed by Netflix, don't rely on publicists tossing names around last minute. There are tiers, blocks, allocations. Every name on that clipboard is pre-approved, often weeks in advance. Studio names come first, then producers' picks, then cast invites, then distributor VIPs, then fashion and PR partners. And finally, only finally, come the plus ones and high-profile courtesies. Meghan's name, allegedly, was pitched in that final category. According to a leaked email chain between a well-known publicist and an anonymous studio insider, Meghan's team floated the idea of her attending, not as an official guest, but as a potential high-visibility walk-by with brand synergy opportunities. Translation? She wasn't starring in the film. She wasn't producing it. She wasn't even connected to the studio behind it. She just wanted to be seen and associated. And that's where the tension started. Because one particular executive, let's call her Elle, was reportedly not impressed. Insiders claim Elle responded to the request with a curt, "This premiere is not a backdrop." Ouch. Why the hostility? Well, it turns out Meghan had a history with this executive. Back in 2022, when Archewell was shopping around several animated projects, this exec took a meeting with Meghan's team. Multiple ideas were pitched, none of which, according to leaked notes, had structured story arcs or production clarity. The result? An internal label, high-risk PR value, low follow-through potential. Ever since, Elle had allegedly kept her distance. And when Meghan's name appeared again, this time tied to a film she had no involvement in, Elle reportedly made one decisive move. She vetoed the entry. That's right, not just rejected, blocked. Because in these circles, off the list doesn't mean we forgot you. It means we removed you. Now imagine that. You think you're attending. You've prepped the look, called in the glam team, even whispered to your press friends that you might swing by. And then someone, behind a very big desk with a very long memory, quietly erases your name. Not out of spite, but out of strategy. Because here's the kicker. At the time of the premiere, Meghan's own project was rumored to be facing delays. Her Archewell brand was in a mid-level identity crisis. Staff turnover, investor hesitations, a lukewarm reaction to her recent keynote appearance at a UN Women's Summit. One Hollywood source told us bluntly, she's no longer the draw she used to be. She's unpredictable, high maintenance. You don't know if she's going to elevate the night or hijack it. And that's the contradiction Meghan now finds herself trapped in. She's famous, undeniably. But fame without favor in Hollywood? That's a lonely place. And the proof is in the radio silence that followed. Because after the incident, Meghan's camp reached out, multiple times, to clarify what had happened. Some say it was to request a formal apology. Others claim they simply wanted to know who made the call. They got no response. Total silence. From publicists. From Netflix insiders. From production contacts they'd worked with before. And if you know anything about LA, that kind of silence is deliberate. It's how the city says, we're done. But the worst part? The reaction from people inside the event. An eyewitness working the check-in table shared this anonymously. Once it was clear Meghan wasn't coming in, the energy actually lifted. People were whispering, thank God. I don't think they feared her. I think they were just exhausted by her. Another said, she brings drama, even when she doesn't try to. Just her presence can turn a red carpet into a political arena. No one wants that anymore. Think about that. The very woman who once used her platform to champion modern causes is now seen as a lightning rod. Not because of what she says, but because of what she represents. A break from the monarchy, a complicated re-entry into celebrity culture, and a brand that increasingly feels more like a question mark than a crown jewel. So the question remains. Did Meghan know she wasn't officially on the list? Or did she assume, by sheer force of brand, that the rope would part anyway? One close former associate believes the latter. She operates from a place where access is expected, not requested. She doesn't take well to know, especially not in public. And that brings us to the most unsettling part of this whole ordeal. What if it was meant to be public? What if someone behind the scenes knew she'd show up? Wanted her to. Just to prove a point. Just to send a signal. To her. To Hollywood. To anyone still unsure where the tide was turning. Because sometimes in this town, the cruelest way to end a reign isn't to attack it directly. It's to ignore it. To leave it outside. Staring at a velvet rope. As the cameras roll and the doors close. But just when it looked like Meghan had no move left, something changed. Someone unexpected reached out. Not from Netflix. Not from PR. But from a rival studio. A name no one saw coming. And what they offered her might be her only chance at redemption, or her biggest risk yet. She thought Hollywood would welcome her back with open arms. But somewhere along the way, the door quietly shut. When did the glow fade? That's the question everyone is now asking. Because in the early days after Megxit, when Meghan and Harry touched down in California with dreams of building an empire, there was no shortage of buzz. They had royal titles, global fame, and a compelling narrative, escapees from a cold palace, stepping into the warm embrace of American freedom. For a moment, they were the darlings of Hollywood. Netflix executives were tripping over themselves to get meetings. Streaming platforms whispered about docudramas, scripted biopics, animations. Meghan's every Zoom call with a studio executive was treated like a cultural event. Paparazzi camped outside their Montecito estate. People magazine ran, sources say, updates weekly. The pitch was clear. Meghan would become the polished, powerful voice of a new era. A woman with reach, elegance, and the narrative gravitas of a Diana 2.0, minus the tiaras, plus the podcasts. And then, the silence started. But it didn't begin with a bang. It began with a whisper. A postponed production meeting here. A ghosted email thread there. A publicist who said, let's wait until the next quarter. At first, Meghan's team blamed the pandemic. Then it was creative pivots. Then it was saturation. But underneath it all, Hollywood insiders were starting to murmur the one thing no brand wants to hear. Meghan fatigue. Yes, it's real. And it hits fast. Because in Hollywood, buzz is a currency with an expiration date. And Meghan's initial wave of publicity had burned so brightly. Oprah, Spotify, Netflix, Archewell, The Cut, Variety, Vogue, that it left little room for surprise, growth, or evolution. She became predictable. And predictable in Hollywood is the kiss of death. The projects that followed didn't help either. Let's take a hard look. Archetypes. The Spotify podcast billed as Meghan's grand platform for deconstructing labels and empowering women fizzled. Despite a splashy start and big-name guests, listener drop-off was steep. Critics called it overly scripted, lacking spontaneity, and, worst of all, sanitized for brand safety. Behind closed doors, Spotify executives weren't just unimpressed. They were livid. An insider told the Wall Street Journal. There wasn't enough content. We expected more engagement, more insight. What we got felt like PR copy. Eventually, the deal was axed. Quietly, but unmistakably. That was strike one. Then came the Netflix deal. Touted as a $100 million partnership, Archewell Productions was expected to deliver game-changing content. What did they produce? One documentary, Harry and Meghan, a beautifully shot but widely divisive 6-episode series. While it generated headlines, it lacked staying power. Viewers tuned in, debated for a week, and moved on. Netflix, according to industry sources, was not amused. Executives were reportedly reevaluating the partnership. Meetings that once took place in bright boardrooms now happened over Zoom, if at all. Strike two. By 2024, the Archewell brand was floundering in ambiguity. Was it a media company? A nonprofit? A personal brand? An activism hub? Even staff members didn't seem to know. Multiple top-level employees left within months of each other. Anonymous staffers told media outlets that the vision was unclear and constantly shifting depending on press cycles. One former associate reportedly said, "It felt like Meghan was chasing headlines, not building a foundation." And here lies the contradiction at the heart of her Hollywood fall. She wanted control, but not collaboration. She wanted to lead, but not be challenged. She wanted to inspire, but not be questioned. And in an industry built on ego, timing, and politics, that formula stopped working. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Hollywood rewards likability over legacy. If you're hard to work with, you better bring results. If you're selective with press, you better have mystique. If you're opinionated, you better be consistent. Meghan, increasingly, wasn't delivering on any of those fronts. And the result? The phone calls slowed. Invitations became less frequent. Even her fashion icon status took a hit. Designers began prioritizing Gen Z darlings and TikTok breakout stars. No one wanted to lend couture to a celebrity with headlines questioning her likability. You could feel it everywhere. At award shows, she was conspicuously absent. At fashion galas, her name wasn't even floated. At roundtable panels, organizers preferred Florence Pugh, Sydney Sweeney, or even activist actresses like Jamila Jamil. One studio executive put it bluntly during a recent Variety interview. Off the record, of course. Meghan's audience loves her, but Hollywood isn't her audience. There's a difference. The moment that clicked, we stopped taking her calls. Brutal, and yet accurate. So when Meghan tried to re-enter the red carpet scene via the Marty Supreme Premiere, expecting the gates to part like they once did, what she encountered wasn't rejection. It was reality. Hollywood had moved on. The shine had dulled. The calls weren't being returned. Not because she wasn't talented. Not because she wasn't passionate, but because the timing had shifted and she hadn't adapted. In this town, if you don't reinvent, you're replaced. And Meghan? She was still pitching 2020 energy in a 2025 industry. But don't misunderstand. This wasn't a collapse. It was a cooling. A slow, deliberate, reputational frost. The kind that builds silently behind closed doors. Meeting after meeting. Call after call. Until one day you step out of a car, smile for the cameras, and realize the cameras aren't flashing for you anymore. They're flashing at you. And in those moments, like the one outside the Marty Supreme Premiere, Meghan seemed to finally confront that shift. No curated Instagram post. No thoughtful podcast. No branded documentary. Just reality. But the real question? Did she learn from it? Because shortly after the premiere debacle, something shifted again. A new name popped up. An old friend. An ex-ally. A fellow celebrity turned executive. Someone Meghan once confided in, and later distanced herself from. And they had an offer. An olive branch. But also a warning. And what they said to her might be the most shocking revelation yet. While cameras captured the rejection, Meghan's team launched into a frantic digital cleanup. The clip was barely 27 seconds long. But by the time Meghan's SUV had disappeared into the LA night, that 27-second video had already hit Twitter, Reddit, and 3 celebrity gossip accounts on Instagram, with a combined reach of over 12 million followers. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a contagious humiliation, and Meghan's team knew it. Within minutes, the Archwell PR engine kicked into emergency mode. Phone screens lit up across Montecito. Text threads buzzed with urgency. Calls were made, not to friends, but to handlers, spin doctors, influencers, and old, reliable editors. Damage control had begun. Because when you're Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, uninvited guest at Hollywood's most-watched premiere, you don't just suffer a public snub. You suffer a narrative collapse. And the clock is ticking. How do you recover from being turned away at the door? By rewriting the story before the headlines settle. By the time TMZ picked up the footage and posted the headline, Meghan Markle denied entry to Marty Supreme Premiere. Her team had already fired off their first salvo. There was never any intent to attend. That statement, given anonymously to a friendly entertainment journalist, painted a very different picture. According to the source, Meghan had only briefly stopped by to support a friend involved with the production and left promptly due to a scheduling conflict. Neat, polished, deniable, but also completely unbelievable. Because by this point, everyone had seen the footage. The confusion, the insistence, the assistant checking her phone, the security guard leaning in to block the entrance. This wasn't a swing by. This was a planned entrance. And it had failed. So when Meghan's team tried to slap a glossy Instagram filter over the embarrassment, the public didn't buy it. Instead, they mocked it. Social media lit up with hashtags like #MeghanGate, #RedCarpetBlocked, and #DuchessDenied. Meme accounts had a field day. One viral post showed Meghan at the premiere doors photoshopped next to a "Keep Out" sign with the caption, "Plot twist, Hollywood is the new palace." Another read, "When you ghosted the royal family, but Hollywood ghosts you." It was savage. It was fast. And it was effective. The internet had done what it does best, amplified the moment until no amount of PR lipstick could hide the bruise. But Meghan's team wasn't done. They pivoted. A new narrative emerged late the next day. This was Meghan being the bigger person. In a calculated leak to a UK tabloid. Yes, even the ones she'd previously sued. Sources claimed that Meghan had chosen not to attend after learning of potential tension inside the venue. Translation? She knew she wouldn't be welcomed, so she left. That's what we call defensive revisionism. But here's the kicker. It contradicted their original claim. First, she wasn't planning to attend. Now, she chose not to enter due to tension. Both couldn't be true. And in Hollywood, inconsistencies are like blood in the water. You don't just lose control of the narrative. You invite others to write it for you, which is exactly what happened next. One former Archwell contractor, speaking anonymously to a podcast host, dropped this subtle grenade. There's always a cleanup plan. Meghan's brand is like a high-stakes startup. Every public step has a plan A, B, and crisis mode Z. The host laughed nervously, then asked, "Are you saying this whole thing was staged?" The contractor hesitated, and then said, "Let's just say, when things go wrong, the scramble is real. Scramble is right." Because behind closed doors, the cleanup wasn't limited to press spin. Meghan's digital team sprang into stealth mode. Old posts were edited. Hashtags she'd quietly liked were unliked. Even Google search results began to subtly shift. How? Enter reputation management firms. In 2025, these are digital hit squads that flood the internet with counter-narratives, blog posts, keyword-optimized articles, and fluff content to drown out controversy. And Meghan's team? They're no strangers to them. Within 24 hours of the Premiere debacle, over 30 new online articles had appeared praising her fashion choices, her charity work, her recent appearance at a children's hospital. All mysteriously published on low-traffic lifestyle sites. All conveniently shared by fan accounts that often trace back to PR firms. This wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. They were trying to bury the embarrassment with praise. But the internet doesn't forget. And this time, the backlash hit back. Popular YouTube commentators began calling out the artificial positivity. "Why are we suddenly getting flooded with Meghan puff pieces?" asked one user in a reaction video. "Feels like someone's trying really hard to make us forget what we saw." Others dug deeper. Screenshots circulated showing private messages from stylists, assistants, and even a junior publicist at the premiere itself, claiming Meghan's team had been lobbying for an invite for weeks. One message read, "They tried to pressure their way in through a Netflix contact. Got told no, then showed up anyway." Boom. There it was. A direct contradiction to the public claim. Not only was she not invited, but she was actively declined, and came anyway. Which raises the ultimate question. Why risk it? Why show up knowing you might be turned away? Because, as one PR veteran put it, in Meghan's world, presence is power. Being seen, even controversially, is better than fading from view. She'd rather risk embarrassment than irrelevance. That's a brutal assessment, but it matches the facts. And that brings us to the most desperate part of the PR spin. A sudden push for sympathy. Late that week, People magazine, long known to have a sympathetic line to Meghan, ran a piece with anonymous sources claiming that Meghan felt deeply wounded and betrayed by how she was treated at the event. She had expected a warm welcome. She was hurt by the coldness. She had only wanted to support a friend. The tone shifted from assertive to vulnerable, from confident duchess to wronged woman. And make no mistake, this was calculated. It was an appeal to the empathy Meghan's brand was originally built on. But this time, it didn't land. The comments under the article were ruthless. "She's always the victim. This isn't Buckingham Palace. Grow up." She tried to crash a party and got mad she wasn't on the list. The tide had turned. Even fans were confused. Some quietly unfollowed. Others simply stayed silent. And in the world of celebrity branding, silence is death. But there was one comment that stood out. A chilling one, posted under a reaction video with over 200,000 views. "You can't control the story forever. Eventually, the story writes you." And maybe that's exactly what happened here. For years, Meghan had controlled her image. She'd been the narrator of her own arc. But this time, the camera caught something her words couldn't erase. This time, the story escaped her grip. And just when her team thought the situation couldn't get any worse. Just when the spin was reaching its peak. Just when they were finally managing to push the footage out of trending status. An email leaked. A very specific, very damning email. From inside the event. One that revealed exactly who made the decision to deny Meghan entry. And what it said made everything worse. One rising star, one perfect dress, and one moment that stung Meghan more than the snub itself. It wasn't just that Meghan wasn't allowed in. It's who walked in while she was being turned away. That's what really burned. Because just as Meghan stood frozen outside the Marty Supreme Premiere, chin lifted, smile faltering, security unmoved, another SUV pulled up behind her. Out stepped a woman half her age, wearing the very same designer Meghan had been rumored to debut that night. Same cut. Same color family. Same sultry side slit. But with one key difference. She belonged. The cameras whirred to life. Reporters leaned over barricades. Flashes ignited as handlers whispered her name, loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear. Ella Carver. And Meghan? Still standing near the velvet rope, half-turned, visibly bristling as a sea of attention shifted away from her, onto her replacement. It was like watching royalty get dethroned in real time. Now if you're not familiar with Ella Carver, you're about to be. Because in Hollywood, she's the it girl of the moment. Young, poised, razor-sharp cheekbones, and a resume building faster than Meghan's Instagram followers back in 2017. And most crucially, rumored to be in talks with the very same Netflix execs who once cut their $100 million deal with Meghan and Harry. Coincidence? Please. The symbolism was too loud to ignore. Two women. One rising, one falling. One welcomed, one blocked. And both styled by the same fashion house. Yes, that part is true. Industry insiders confirmed that Meghan's team had requested a one-of-a-kind couture piece from Maison Novar, a Parisian designer known for minimalist drama and exclusive clients. The request had been placed 6 weeks before the event. The designer had accepted. Sketches were sent. Fabric swatches reviewed. Tailoring discussed. But just days before the premiere, communications with Meghan's stylist went dark. And then? The same gown, allegedly tweaked at the last minute, was worn by Ella Carver on that red carpet. That wasn't a fashion mix-up. That was a message. And Meghan got it loud and clear. Because Ella didn't just wear the dress. She owned the moment Meghan thought was hers. And it wasn't just about fashion. It was placement. Ella was escorted into the venue by one of the film's associate producers. She posed in front of the main branding wall. She gave a brief interview on the live stream. And at the after-party, she was seen laughing with 2 top Netflix executives and sipping champagne next to the film's lead actress. Everything Meghan had hoped to be doing. Everything she used to do. Gone. But here's where it gets even colder. A leaked production email, part of the internal Marty Supreme coordination chain, contained a line that practically screamed sabotage. Let's pivot to the new face. Avoid legacy distractions. Legacy distractions. That's how Meghan Markle is now referred to behind closed doors. Not A-list draw. Not royal wildcard. Just a distraction. A beautiful, polished, legacy distraction. Because Hollywood isn't sentimental. It loves a comeback, but only if it comes with box office pull. And Meghan, for all her global visibility, doesn't sell like she used to. At least, not in the right way. One film publicist who asked to remain anonymous put it this way. She brings attention, but not always the kind you want. With Meghan, it's never just about the event. It becomes about her team, her drama, and sometimes, people just want a premiere, not a crisis. Ouch. And yet, can you blame them? After the Oprah interview, the Spotify backlash, the Archewell floundering, and now the Marty Supreme incident, Meghan's brand feels caught in a loop. Victim, survivor, fighter, misunderstood, repeat. But Ella? Ella is fresh, undefinable. A blank canvas with perfect skin and no scandal baggage. And the industry loves a blank canvas. But don't get it twisted. Meghan noticed. She noticed everything. Multiple onlookers said Meghan actually paused, as Ella walked by. Watched her, took her in, recognized the designer, registered the producer on Ella's arm. And for a brief moment, her smile vanished. Then she turned, walked calmly to her car, and left. But the damage? Already done. Not just to her night, but to her ego. Because for someone like Meghan, who spent the last 5 years building a meticulously controlled public image, that red carpet belonged to her. At least, in her mind, it did. Ella Carver? She was just supposed to be background. Instead, she became the headline. One columnist even wrote the next day, "If Ella Carver wasn't a star before last night, she is now." And what's more poetic than ascending the red carpet throne while the former Duchess watches from the curb? Poetic? More like brutal. And Hollywood lives for it. Because that's what this city runs on, narratives. And Meghan just lost control of hers. Not to a scandal, not to a controversy, but to a prettier, younger, better-timed version of herself. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning, when Meghan's team realized something chilling. The same publicist who helped place Ella Carver in that premiere, the one who secured the dress, arranged the interviews, used to work for Meghan. Yes, you read that right. A former member of her own PR squad. And when that name hit her inbox, when Meghan saw who had orchestrated the new face coup, her reaction was reportedly furious. One insider described her as stunned, betrayed, and livid. Another source whispered, "She said, I made her, and now she's positioning someone else in my place." The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. Because for Meghan, this wasn't about a dress. It was about being replaced. By someone younger, someone sleeker, someone with fewer headlines and more opportunities. But here's where things really take a twist. Because just as Meghan began plotting her next move, she received a message from someone inside the Marty Supreme production team. Someone who saw what happened, and what they shared wasn't just gossip. It was evidence. A forwarded email, an internal decision tree, a blacklist, and Meghan's name was on it. She wasn't blocked by accident. This was orchestrated. The only question was, by whom? It's easy to assume the Marty Supreme incident was just a logistical snafu, a name missing on a clipboard, a last-minute mix-up, a minor embarrassment that got blown out of proportion by a 27-second video clip. But that's not what happened. Not even close. Because behind the velvet rope and beneath the PR scramble, a far more deliberate operation was unfolding. One with names, intentions, and internal communications that paint a very different picture. This wasn't chaos. This was coordination. And someone made the call. Let's rewind. Within 48 hours of Meghan's public humiliation, a strange email landed in a secure inbox. The sender? A production assistant on the Marty Supreme team, anonymous for now, but verified by several corroborating insiders. The subject line was short. "You should see this." Attached? A PDF of internal comms from 2 weeks before the premiere. A message thread from within the guest list coordination team. No frills. No vagueness. Just cold, professional dialogue. And buried 3 paragraphs in, there it was. Markle request, declined per directive. Confirmed not cleared. Please ensure compliance at entry. No discussion. No hesitation. Just a directive. So now the question shifts from was Meghan uninvited to who sent that directive? Because someone high enough in the food chain intentionally said, "Do not let her in." And that's where the trail starts heating up. There are 3 key figures who could have made the call. Let's break them down. Suspect number 1, the studio publicity chief. We'll call her AM for now. She's worked on some of Netflix's biggest award season campaigns. Slick, strategic, known in the industry for her no-nonsense attitude and her obsession with narrative control. And she doesn't like wild cards. In the weeks leading up to the premiere, AM had been especially clear with her team. No unapproved media moments, no unsanctioned guests, and, most importantly, no distracting headlines. Why would she block Meghan? According to one source, AM didn't want the premiere hijacked. Meghan showing up would have made it about her, not the film. That's the kind of disruption she eliminates in advance. Fair point. But that email? The directive? It didn't come from AM's account. Which brings us to suspect number 2, the executive producer. Let's call him RK. Formerly a darling of the indie film world, now a rising player at Netflix's original content division. Sharp, charming, and, according to some insiders, very connected to the royal world, particularly Prince William's Climate Foundation, which once partnered with a docu-series RK produced. Now things get interesting. Why would someone aligned with William care about Meghan's presence? The answer lies in a simple but brutal phrase: optics. The premiere was supposed to signal a new era of prestige storytelling, a grown-up Netflix, a distancing from celebrity drama and tabloid spectacle. Meghan's presence, controversial, unpredictable, risked hijacking that narrative. And RK doesn't do risk. One former colleague put it bluntly. He likes things clean. He wants control. Meghan doesn't fit that model anymore. Still, the directive wasn't signed by RK either. But there's one more name on the list. And this one, it hits deeply personal. Suspect number 3, the quiet strategist and former Meghan ally. We'll call her DS. 10 years ago, she and Meghan were rising together, both on the outskirts of Hollywood power, both working to climb the same ladder. DS was a low-level talent coordinator back then. Meghan was a supporting actress on Suits. They shared stylists. They attended the same boutique fundraisers. There are even photos. Smiling together at a rooftop event in 2015. But somewhere along the way, things soured. No one knows exactly why. Some say DS offered Meghan PR advice that was ignored. Others claim DS was squeezed out when Meghan started dating Harry and upgraded her team. Fast forward to 2025, and DS is now the director of talent access for Netflix originals. And guess whose name was in the metadata of that guest list directive? You guessed it, DS. So was this personal, professional, or both? The truth might be a cocktail of revenge and strategy. Because DS, according to multiple insiders, had long warned against letting Meghan hijack Netflix optics. She reportedly saw the Archewell deal as a political liability disguised as a content opportunity. And when Meghan's Spotify deal imploded, DS was vindicated. One leaked Slack message from a Netflix internal channel captured it perfectly. Told you the Duchess effect was a gamble. Now let's not double down. The timing of that message. 2 days before the Marty Supreme guest list was finalized. Coincidence? Not likely. Especially since DS was the one who had final sign-off on Category C attendees. The VIPs who weren't directly involved in production, but were still high-profile enough to warrant potential entry. Meghan's name appeared on that list and was crossed out, with a single-word comment next to it. Disruptive. And that, dear viewers, is Hollywood code for she's not worth the trouble. So who really made the call? It wasn't one person. It was a system. A network of quiet gatekeepers who once courted Meghan's attention and now actively manage her exclusion. The red rope didn't just rise for someone else. It lowered specifically to keep her out. That's not an accident. That's strategy. But here's the twist. While DS and her fellow decision-makers thought the story would end at the curb, they underestimated one thing. Meghan isn't known for walking away quietly. Because shortly after receiving that leaked directive, Meghan's team went into lockdown mode. Not shame, not retreat, retaliation. And her first move? A secret meeting with a rival network executive. A man who has every reason to undermine Netflix. A man who once tried to sign Meghan before Archewell went to Netflix. And now, he's back in the picture. Arms open, pockets deep, and ready to play ball. But if Meghan takes this deal, she risks burning the last bridge she has left. The premiere incident was just the beginning. That same week, Archewell was bleeding credibility. What if Meghan's red carpet humiliation wasn't just a standalone moment, but the symptom of a deeper collapse? Because as the paparazzi lens froze her in place at the Marty Supreme Premiere, something even more damaging was happening behind the scenes, across offices, emails, and Slack channels that bore the name Archewell. And by the time the premiere drama exploded on social media, Meghan's empire was already in freefall. This wasn't just a bad week. It was a crisis week, and it changed everything. Let's break it down. The Monday before the Marty Supreme event, Archewell's head of digital strategy abruptly resigned. No farewell post. No curated goodbye. Just a quiet, effective immediately message and a change in the LinkedIn bio. By Tuesday, rumors were circulating that 2 more senior staff members had handed in notice, one from the partnerships division, the other from philanthropic strategy. And by Wednesday, a leaked internal memo revealed what no one on the outside had suspected. A major donor was pulling out. Not just any donor. One of Archewell's earliest backers. Someone who had invested in the brand not just financially, but reputationally. And according to that memo, the reason was clear. Unmet deliverables, unclear impact metrics, and ongoing press volatility. Oof. Let's unpack that. Unmet deliverables? Translation: the projects Meghan and Harry promised hadn't materialized. Unclear impact metrics? Translation: the donations weren't turning into visible, quantifiable change. Ongoing press volatility? We don't even need to translate that one. Because Meghan was the volatility. Every headline about Spotify, every YouTube takedown, every viral TikTok dissecting her, "I'm just like you" quotes. And now the Marty Supreme snub. It was all building. And donors? They don't like drama. Especially not drama without a payoff. This is where things get darker. One of the internal Slack threads, leaked anonymously by a frustrated employee, captured the mood perfectly. It was from the night of the premiere. "We're bleeding out in public, and all anyone cares about is who's dressing who. The real story? We're losing everything." Another employee replied, "I've updated the budget model 3 times this week. Nothing adds up." At the same time, Archwell's own website experienced a quiet purge. Several project pages, once proudly displayed, suddenly went offline or redirected to vague landing pages with generic copy. Gone was the Archwell audio tab. Gone was the animated series teaser. Even the education equity initiative Meghan once championed had been reduced to a single paragraph with no recent updates. Visitors noticed, and they asked, "What is Archwell doing now?" The answer? No one seemed to know, even staff. And here's the part that shocked insiders the most. The calls to the foundation's media hotline stopped being from reporters. They started being from lawyers. Yes, lawyers. One firm, based in Beverly Hills, known for reputation risk audits, had reportedly been asked to evaluate Archwell's exposure liability should another donor withdraw. That's not just bad PR. That's structural collapse. But Meghan, according to 2 sources, refused to see it that way. During a tense call with advisors, taking place just 2 days after the premiere incident, she allegedly pushed back hard on the framing of the situation. One participant claimed, she said, "We're not losing anything. We're repositioning. Let them doubt us. It'll make the comeback bigger." Classic spin. But the room didn't agree. And that's when the second leak happened. Not from inside Archwell, but from a partner NGO. They'd been collaborating with Meghan on a high-profile documentary about women in leadership, something that had been teased for nearly 2 years. And they were tired of waiting. They released a statement. "We remain committed to the work, though timelines with certain collaborators have proven challenging." No names, but everyone knew who they meant. And the message was loud. Meghan doesn't follow through. She starts. She pitches. She posts. But she doesn't deliver. And in the world of philanthropy, just like in Hollywood, deliverables are everything. But perhaps the most damning moment of the week came Friday morning. A well-respected royal journalist published a quiet bombshell in a mid-tier outlet. Not a tabloid, not a gossip blog, but an old-school, facts-first trade publication. The headline? Archwell's brand drift, from mission to mayhem. The article quoted multiple former staffers who described a directionless leadership style, an obsession with optics over outcomes, and a work culture driven by Meghan's emotional temperature. One excerpt stood out. She wants to be the face of every win, but she vanishes during setbacks. And when she does resurface, it's always to ask how she looks in the story. By Sunday, Archwell had trended for the wrong reasons 3 times in 1 week. Not because of achievements, not because of impact, but because of exits, silence, and a red carpet rejection that exposed how far the brand had drifted from its original promise. But the final nail? That came from inside the palace. Well, not the palace exactly, but close enough. A prominent royal reporter, who had been unusually quiet on Sussex-related topics, tweeted something cryptic. No name, no context, just this. When you turn every platform into a mirror, don't be surprised when no one else sees themselves in it. The message was clear. Meghan's empire wasn't collapsing because of one moment. It was collapsing because of a pattern. The pattern of starting loudly and ending quietly. Of promises made, but not fulfilled. Of narratives crafted, but not grounded. And the Marty Supreme Premiere was simply the moment the world finally noticed. But here's the irony. Just when the headlines were at their worst, just when Archwell seemed one misstep away from total implosion, Meghan made a phone call. Not to Harry, not to Oprah, but to someone she hadn't spoken to in over 3 years. Someone once described as her only real industry mentor. And what they offered her wasn't a handout. It was a reboot. But there was one condition. She had to walk away from everything Archewell stood for, everything she built, everything she said she believed in, and the decision she made next would shock everyone. Being not on the list is one thing. Being removed from it is another. Let's ask the real question here. Was Meghan Markle ever actually supposed to be at that premiere? Or did someone go out of their way to make sure she wasn't? At first glance, it seemed like a simple mishap, a scheduling mix-up, a guest list oversight. But as the dust settled and insiders began whispering, one theme kept emerging. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message, and it wasn't subtle. You see, in Hollywood, the list isn't just a name check at the door. It's a currency of power, a barometer of influence, a reflection of how wanted, needed, or strategically useful someone is at any given moment. And Meghan? Let's be real. There was a time she didn't even need to ask. Back in 2021, when the Oprah interview was still a cultural firebomb and Archewell had just inked its Netflix deal, Meghan's name could get her into almost any room in LA. Fashion houses fought to dress her. Directors flirted with Doka cameos. Charity galas bent over backward to make space for her. But fast forward to the Marty Supreme Premiere in late 2025, and not only was she absent from the A-list, she was actively excluded. So what happened? Who pulled her off the list? And why would they risk alienating someone who, at least publicly, still carried the Duchess glow? It starts with the structure of guest lists. And this part? It gets surprisingly political. Premieres of this magnitude, especially ones backed by Netflix, don't rely on publicists tossing names around last minute. There are tiers, blocks, allocations. Every name on that clipboard is pre-approved, often weeks in advance. Studio names come first, then producers' picks, then cast invites, then distributor VIPs, then fashion and PR partners. And finally, only finally, come the plus ones and high-profile courtesies. Meghan's name, allegedly, was pitched in that final category. According to a leaked email chain between a well-known publicist and an anonymous studio insider, Meghan's team floated the idea of her attending, not as an official guest, but as a potential high-visibility walk-by with brand synergy opportunities. Translation? She wasn't starring in the film. She wasn't producing it. She wasn't even connected to the studio behind it. She just wanted to be seen and associated. And that's where the tension started. Because one particular executive, let's call her Elle, was reportedly not impressed. Insiders claim Elle responded to the request with a curt, "This premiere is not a backdrop." Ouch. Why the hostility? Well, it turns out Meghan had a history with this executive. Back in 2022, when Archewell was shopping around several animated projects, this exec took a meeting with Meghan's team. Multiple ideas were pitched, none of which, according to leaked notes, had structured story arcs or production clarity. The result? An internal label, high-risk PR value, low follow-through potential. Ever since, Elle had allegedly kept her distance. And when Meghan's name appeared again, this time tied to a film she had no involvement in, Elle reportedly made one decisive move. She vetoed the entry. That's right, not just rejected, blocked. Because in these circles, off the list doesn't mean we forgot you. It means we removed you. Now imagine that. You think you're attending. You've prepped the look, called in the glam team, even whispered to your press friends that you might swing by. And then someone, behind a very big desk with a very long memory, quietly erases your name. Not out of spite, but out of strategy. Because here's the kicker. At the time of the premiere, Meghan's own project was rumored to be facing delays. Her Archewell brand was in a mid-level identity crisis. Staff turnover, investor hesitations, a lukewarm reaction to her recent keynote appearance at a UN Women's Summit. One Hollywood source told us bluntly, she's no longer the draw she used to be. She's unpredictable, high maintenance. You don't know if she's going to elevate the night or hijack it. And that's the contradiction Meghan now finds herself trapped in. She's famous, undeniably. But fame without favor in Hollywood? That's a lonely place. And the proof is in the radio silence that followed. Because after the incident, Meghan's camp reached out multiple times to clarify what had happened. Some say it was to request a formal apology. Others claim they simply wanted to know who made the call. They got no response. Total silence. From publicists. From Netflix insiders. from production contacts they'd worked with before. And if you know anything about LA, that kind of silence is deliberate. It's how the city says, "We're done." But the worst part? The reaction from people inside the event. An eyewitness working the check-in table shared this anonymously. Once it was clear Meghan wasn't coming in, the energy actually lifted. People were whispering, "Thank God." I don't think they feared her. I think they were just exhausted by her. Another said, "She brings drama, even when she doesn't try to. Just her presence can turn a red carpet into a political arena. No one wants that anymore." Think about that. The very woman who once used her platform to champion modern causes is now seen as a lightning rod. Not because of what she says, but because of what she represents. A break from the monarchy, a complicated re-entry into celebrity culture, and a brand that increasingly feels more like a question mark than a crown jewel. So the question remains, did Meghan know she wasn't officially on the list? Or did she assume, by sheer force of brand, that the rope would part anyway? One close former associate believes the latter. She operates from a place where access is expected, not requested. She doesn't take well to know, especially not in public. And that brings us to the most unsettling part of this whole ordeal. What if it was meant to be public? What if someone behind the scenes knew she'd show up, wanted her to, just to prove a point, just to send a signal? To her, to Hollywood, to anyone still unsure where the tide was turning. Because sometimes in this town, the cruelest way to end a reign isn't to attack it directly. It's to ignore it, to leave it outside, staring at a velvet rope, as the cameras roll and the doors close. But just when it looked like Meghan had no move left, something changed. Someone unexpected reached out.